Hey there, so I want to answer a question that I've been hearing a lot about shifting your sales messaging to take into account what is going on in the world right now and how things have shifted. So a lot of people are asking this question, and I think it's a really good question to be asking. But before diving into how you can start shifting the way that you're having these sales conversations and the way that you're talking about your offers during these times, I want to talk a little bit more about what effective sales messaging looks like during any time, because there are some basic sales messaging principles that are true no matter what's going on in the world. And so it's just really going to be a matter of shifting a few pieces of how you're approaching things in your sales messaging rather than like we have to start from scratch, right? So as a starting point with messaging, I believe that it all starts with empathy. Empathy is one of my business core values, and it's a huge component of the way that I teach messaging. So really, what your messaging is about at its core is empathizing with your ideal client and then being able to put yourself in their shoes so that you can really understand their experience and then implement that and speak to that into your copy, okay? So in the context of sales messaging, it's that same basic concept. We're just taking it even more deep and even more specific because we're hyper-focused on empathizing with your ideal client, but it's specifically related to the area of their life that you can help them. So it's whatever problem you solve, whatever outcome you help them get, it's specifically in that area of your life. We're empathizing with their experience in that space, okay? So sales messaging is all about expressing that empathy to your ideal clients in their experience of the problem that you solve and how that's showing up in their lives, and then showing them that you have a product or a service that is the solution that's going to get them to the other side of that problem and achieve the outcome that they want. Those are the sales messaging basics, and they are true regardless of what is going on in the world. And the absolute key to effective messaging is to deeply know your ideal clients and have radical empathy for what they are experiencing always. Like whether it's really good times, whether it's hard times, whatever's going on in the world, we need to be in tune to what your ideal client is experiencing and then infusing that into your messaging. So your messaging is really just how you express that empathy and show your ideal clients that you have something that will help them to solve a problem and achieve that desired outcome. So in the context of what's going on right now, all of that is still true, but empathizing with your ideal client is going to look a lot different. So if you've done some of this work to really get to know your ideal client, understand their thoughts and their feelings are a lot different than they were a month ago. And so that's really where that shift is going to come in, is to, pay attention to what has changed for them and include some of that in your sales messaging. Okay, so there is no denying that your audience and your potential customers, their lives have changed. Like they are spending a lot more time at home. Their routines have changed. Their finances have changed. Their relationships have changed. There's just a lot going on, right? And so one thing that I see people doing with their messaging, because of all this stuff that's going on and all these changes that are happening, what I see people doing, which I think is a mistake, is that I see people shifting their messaging to focus on all of these things, all of the things that are changing. And their messaging is all about like these things that are changing, but really that's not the best way to go about this. So your sales messaging still needs to be hyper-focused on the area of your ideal client's life that you solve a problem for them, okay? So a question that I keep hearing is, how do I address what's going on in my messaging? But that's really not the question to be asking. The question that you want to be asking is, how has my ideal client's life changed, specifically in the context of the problem that you solve for them? How have their priorities shifted, specifically in the context of the problem that you solve for them? So the question about how you shift your sales messaging, it really is not about how has their life changed in every single area. It's more about how has their priority shifted in terms of the work that I do and the way that I can help them. And so then the question becomes, what do I do next? Like once you identify that, how they have shifted, then the question is, how do I shift my messaging? But you've got to ask that question first. So in terms of how you shift your messaging, you're not going to like this, but the answer really is that it depends. It depends on that first question. It depends on how your ideal client's priorities have shifted. And so when you ask that question, depending on the answer there, you can start making shifts in your messaging depending on if their priorities have gone way up or way down or somewhere in between, okay? So we're gonna talk about those 3 scenarios of like whether there's like way, like that's like a major priority, it's a way high demand for them now, or it's gone way down, they're like no interest at all, or maybe not even possible to work with you right now, or you're somewhere in the middle. I think a lot of us are gonna fall somewhere in the middle. So we're gonna talk a lot about that middle section. But first, let's talk at the top of the ladder. Like if your work has become even more relevant and even more of a priority for your ideal clients' lives, that could be like if you help with anything related to teaching or kids or something that's going to help parents that have their kids at home right now. If you teach meal planning, or if you do something with like productivity while working from home, or building, something that's like really relevant for right now. If you're in that industry, if you're in those niches, then what you're already doing, what you've been doing all this time, has just become even more relevant for your ideal clients' lives. And so if that is you, if you're in that situation, you don't necessarily need to make any shifts to your messaging. What your message has been all this time is still really relevant. So it may just be about adding a little bit of context so that you're addressing what is going on, and maybe just a little bit of a reminder in terms of like, I know you're experiencing this right now, so my offer can help you to like alleviate some of those stresses and pains that you're experiencing right now. So that's like best case scenario, right? If you're in that situation where you just happen to be in the right industry where there's more of a demand right now. But let's shift gears and talk about the opposite side of the spectrum. So the opposite side is that you are not able to keep working right now. Like the way that you work with clients and the problem you solved has completely been taken off the table. So maybe you are working in person with people, or you're a photographer, a wedding planner, a salon owner, and you're in an industry where you've completely been affected. You can't work with clients. In that case, your sales messaging is probably going to need to shift quite a bit. And I know that you probably know that. I know you've been in it for a few weeks now. But I want to give you a little bit of encouragement and ideas for how you can stay connected with your ideal clients and stay connected with your audience as all of this is going on, and continue to sell even if it feels like you have nothing to sell at this point because you've been shut down. Okay, so your sales messaging, if you have been severely impacted in the way that you're able to work with clients, I would really encourage you to use this time to get creative and find some new, like unconventional ways to continue supporting your clients if you can during this time. And I've heard some really cool stories over the last few weeks about people doing this. I've heard like over Easter weekend of a photographer going and doing like drive-by photo shoots to like go to people's houses, and the families were like standing out in the yard, like wearing their Sunday best, even though they weren't going anywhere. And the photographer just came and like from a safe distance took their photos. And so she was able to generate some revenue and serve her clients in that way. I've also heard of hairstylists selling like dye kits so that their clients who can't come and have their hair dyed in the salon can take the professional dye and then like do it themselves at home. So like giving them instructions and teaching them how to do that. So I've heard of like some really cool and innovative, unconventional things that people are doing to kind of try to keep serving their clients and try to keep generating revenue in this time. So if if there's any way for you to work virtually with your clients or do things with them that may not be ideal to do virtually, but can be done virtually, and you can kind of shift some of the ways that you're working with clients, I would highly encourage that. But I know that's kind of not what we're talking about here. We're talking more about like once you've come up with those ideas, how to go on and then sell them, right? So we're talking about like the messaging and the sales messaging when it comes to selling whatever it is that you're able to sell right now. So what I want to say with your messaging is that now is the time more than ever to embrace vulnerability. Now is the time to be open and to be honest about what is going on and the fact that this is a hard time. And you can talk about how much you value your customers and also remind them of how much they value your services and how much they appreciate the services that you provide them and what that does to their lives during normal times when things like this aren't going on. So I would just encourage you to be really vulnerable in an authentic way about the fact that you need their help right now. You need their help in order to make sure that you are still around and you're still operational so you can continue supporting them in that way that they value when this is all over. So that could show up in a lot of different ways. It could be asking people to purchase gift cards for future services. It may be creating some of those like pop-up offers that I talked about and getting creative in the way that you work with your people. But the key with your messaging, whatever it is you decide to sell during this time, is to really be transparent and vulnerable about the fact that this is a hard time, but you're doing what you can and you want to be there for your clients. You want to serve them during this time. And by continuing to purchase from you, they are helping to make sure that you're still around to serve them whenever this is all over. Now, the final group that I want to talk about is those who are in kind of that middle ground where this hasn't caused like a skyrocket in demand for your offer, and it's also not been like a total blow where you've had to shut your doors. So you're still able to keep operating virtually, but you're also, still seeing some negative impacts of what's going on. So your offers may be less of a priority to your ideal clients right now than they were before, but it's still possible for them to work with you. And I think that's where a lot of people are falling. And so that's I want to talk about what you can do in those situations where you're still able to sell, but there's a lot more hesitation about investing. There's a lot more fear around spending money within your client group, okay? So one of the main groups that fall into this category are those who are supporting those hardest hit businesses. So I've heard from a ton of online business owners that say like they could keep operating as normal. They have an online business, they're able to continue running, but their clients are salon owners or photographers or restaurants who they are being hit hard. And so they are losing clients because their clients can't afford to pay for their services anymore. They're dropping those services as a way to save money during this time. So if that's your case, I would encourage you to focus on showing your ideal clients in your sales messaging the value of taking this time when they can't work in the business to work on their business and how your services are going to help them to come back stronger than ever before. There are people out there with that mindset. There are people who are, there are some people who are holding on to their money. They are, waiting for this to pass. They're stopping all expenses until this passes. There are other people who see this as an opportunity to really work on their business and do some things that they don't have time for when they are busy with clients all the time. And so there are definitely people out there who are looking to work on their business right now. And so I would shift my messaging. If I was in that scenario, I would recommend shifting that messaging to focus on finding those people who are ready to work on their business. And also for those that are kind of on the fence about that, just continuing to talk about the value and the benefit of using this time wisely and using this time to grow their business if they're in a position to do so. So definitely, if that is your case, I recommend that you acknowledge what's going on, and you may in your messaging need to do a little bit of kind of coaching them toward that like place where they are thinking about their business long term, where they're not just thinking about the current situation. And so by doing that, you can help them to start really thinking about how they're going to rise out of this. And then you can show them that by working with you now, you're going to help them to come out of this even stronger. So if you work with some of those businesses who have been really hard hit, that's how I would recommend adapting your messaging to fit their current situation. Now, my personal situation, and I think this is true for a lot of you, is that I work with other online business owners, and so my direct clients haven't necessarily been hit super hard by all of this, but even in this industry where like technically we could, online business owners working with other online business owners, we could kind of continue to move forward as normal. We haven't necessarily been quite as hard hit, but as a general rule, a lot of people are just being more cautious about where they spend their money. They're being a little bit more they have more questions. They want to make sure that they're making a good investment, and it's not something that, not that people want to just throw away their money all the time, but people are a little bit more willing to spend money and take a risk when things are good. And so when things are a little bit tighter, people are looking to really see the value that they're going to get from working with you even more, because the fear of wasting money is much higher right now. Okay, so when it comes to talking to these people, if you're selling a service that could continue, especially like if you're business to business, if you're selling to other business owners, and this applies to any industry though, whether you're a business to business or you're selling to consumers who could continue to consume your online services or digital products virtually. What I recommend in terms of shifting your messaging is just reminding your audience why the area that you help people with is important to them. So whatever it is that you do, however you help your clients, it may just be about reminding them why that thing was important before all of this started, why it's still important now, and why it's gonna be important when this is all over. For example, I have been having a lot of conversations both with my coaching clients and with my potential clients on sales calls and things like that around the things that haven't changed during this time. A lot of things have changed, but I think it's important to keep in perspective the things that haven't changed. So I work with a lot of online business owners, entrepreneurs who have a very strong desire to build a successful online business and bring in consistent clients to make a full-time income on their own terms. That was their goal before all of this started. It's still important to them today, and whether everything goes back to normal tomorrow or if this lasts for years, that is still their goal. That is not going to change no matter what happens. And so for me, it's just been a matter of reminding them of that goal, and that even though this is a hard time, they're still working toward the same things, and they can continue to work toward those things during this time. So I've really just been emphasizing how, whatever happens, you still have these same goals, and working on those goals during this time is just going to help you get there faster, regardless of what's going on in the world. And so that's how I have been kind of helping my clients and people that I've been having these conversations with see that it's still a good time to work on your business. It's still a good time to work on your messaging, because you have these goals. Those goals are not going away. And by perfecting and mastering your messaging, that is really just going to help you get there faster. So if you have clients who are in a similar situation where the thing you're helping them with is not directly related to what is going on right now, but it's related to some desire or outcome that they want and they're still gonna want when this is all over, just continue to remind them of why that thing is important and how working with you or buying from you is gonna help them to get there. All right, I hope that's been helpful. We have covered a lot here, and I hope that it has given you some good ideas in terms of where to focus as you shift your sales messaging so that it makes sense and is considerate of everything that's going on during this time. As a quick recap, I want to remind you that the question you want to be asking is not, how do I shift my messaging to fit what's going on? It's, how do I address my ideal clients where they are now? So how do I shift my message to meet my ideal clients where they are in the context that their priorities have shifted during this time? And how can you continue to show up and serve them in that context? So I really want you to start by asking that question. How have my ideal clients' priorities shifted in the specific area that you help them? And if you're not sure, if you're struggling to answer that question, then ask them. Start conversations with real people in your audience and ask them, directly ask them, how are you feeling about insert whatever, you help people with? How are you feeling about whatever it is you help people with everything going on right now? So put it in that context, in the context of what's going on right now. How are you feeling about fitness? How are you feeling about meal planning? How are you feeling about growing your business? How are you feeling about driving traffic to your website? You can ask specific questions with the context of everything going on right now and just see where they are. And then that will help you to build out your sales messaging in a way that speaks to them in their words based on what they've told you. And that is really that's true of messaging no matter what's going on. That is true, and that's where the bulk of your messaging is going to come from, whether we're in a crisis or not. The key to effective messaging is having conversations with real people who fit your ideal client profile, and then giving them, like, saying what they tell you back to them in your messaging. So those conversations that you have with people are going to give you huge insights into what to include in your messaging. And in this current circumstance, it's going to give you insights into how to shift your messaging to meet them where they are right now. Now, as we wrap this up, I want to quickly share one more thing about being considerate. That's a specific question that I was asked, is how do I be more considerate in my sales messaging with everything that's going on? And what I think this question is getting at is, how do I kind of deal with reservations that people might have about spending money with me in a way that takes into account what's going on? So what I want to say about that is that, yes, absolutely, there are people who are holding tight to their money right now and who are not spending. There are people who are struggling financially, who are struggling to make ends meet, and are, just doing the best they can and not spending any other than necessary, 100% necessary expenses. They're not spending any money. Yes, there are people out there in those situations, but there are also people out there who are spending as much or more money than they were before. There are people who are doing just fine financially, and even if they have taken a financial hit, they still have access to money and they're doing okay financially. So I want to just give you some examples to kind of keep that in perspective, because I know it's really easy to go to the thought that no one's spending money, no one can afford to work with me right now, and that's just not true. There are people out there, and some people who I know personally, who even are not able to work right now. There are people I know personally who they've been shut down, they cannot work, but they were prepared for this. They weren't prepared for a pandemic. They weren't expecting that, but they were financially prepared to take a hit. And so they have savings in place where they can keep paying themselves a regular salary for at least a year. And even though from the outside it looks like they've been completely shut down, they can't work at all, they must be really struggling right now, they're actually doing okay. And the reality is that their spending habits haven't changed that much. And so I just want to give you that example to show you that there are people spending money, and you don't know from the outside what their financial situation looks like. And so even for me personally, my business, I've seen a small dip in my business with what's going on. I haven't lost any clients, and I'm so grateful that I get to continue supporting them through all of this, but I have seen a little bit of a decline in new bookings. And so I've seen a small dip, but overall, my, collective household income is really not changed much at all. And so we're doing okay. We're spending money more or less the same as we have before all of this started. And in fact, since all this started, I've invested in working one-on-one with a coach. I've hired a new team member. So I'm continuing to spend money. I'm continuing to contribute to the economy. And I kind of see it as my responsibility to continue showing up, continue selling, and keep doing this, because by continuing to sell, I am able to keep spending money and keep paying my coach, keep paying my team member, and keep paying for all the other investments that I have in the business. So the reason I'm sharing this with you is that I want to give you some evidence that people are still spending money, and what you see from the outside does not tell you what their actual financial situation is. And so how I am recommending sales messaging in the context of a sales conversation, if you're having a conversation with someone, but also if you are just showing up and selling on a webinar, in your email, things like that, just showing up and talking about your offer, keep in mind that you don't know the financial situation. Yes, there are a lot of people struggling. Yes, there are a lot of people who genuinely cannot afford your services, but there are people that can. And you may not be able to tell that just by judging from the outside what you think their situation is. So what I have been doing in my sales conversations in order to kind of take all of that into consideration is to start any sales conversation that I'm having as neutral as possible in terms of my judgment of whether or not the other person is or is not able to afford my services. And so when I'm on a call with a potential client, I show up in a way that I am, showing them the value of my services in the context of what's going on right now, in the context of their particular situation. I'm trying to coach them into a mental, positive state where they're able to think about their long-term goals for what's going to happen when this is all over. And I just, keep continuing to show them the value of my services. And after doing all of that, when it gets to the time to talk about whether or not to invest and have a, pricing conversation and all of that, I am just trying to be extra compassionate in if someone tells me that they can't afford it. I'm offering extended payment plans. I am having a conversation and also being just really understanding if someone tells me that, I can't do that right now, just, letting the person make the decision that's best for them. Without, not that I'm not pushy in my sales conversations, but even more so just being very much okay, that's, you make the decision that's best for you, and just approaching everything with compassion. So at the end of the day, it all comes back to empathy and putting yourself in their shoes, whether it's the shoes of someone who is kind of a, ideal client idea or an actual real person sitting in front of you on a sales call. It all comes back to empathy. So I really hope that this has been helpful. I know it's been long, and I appreciate you sticking around until the end. I am considering putting together a workshop in order to dive deeper into all of this, because I know that messaging is so personal to each individual business. And so this workshop would be an opportunity to get some support and some more specific to your situation feedback to craft your sales messaging during this time. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I'm not sure if I'm going to do this workshop or not. I only want to do it and spend the time putting it together if there's a genuine interest for it. So if that's something you're interested in, if it's something that you think would be helpful, then just leave a comment, let me know, and I'll put something together. All right, thanks.